Órale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. This is your host, Jorge Martin, su servidor. Thank you for joining us. We are going to Nolans, Familia. We are going to Nolans and Superdome, Saints. Oh my goodness. It's, you guys already know that that's my place with my favorite food, and this is one of my favorite people when it comes to the Saints. Mi amigo John Hendrix. Welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Hey man, thanks for having me as always. It's a pleasure to be here, and man, it's kind of crazy. What, this is our third or fourth year straight doing this. This is
Four for four.
Fun. Yeah, it's good, man. So hopefully, doing something right.
Well, I appreciate it. All the people who are 4 for 4 with me. I've been so grateful, and you were one of the first people to say yes. So I'm so grateful because it helped us grow our YouTube channel and everything. So and give us great actionable advice. So make sure you're following John at John J Hendrix on Twitter. So or X, whatever we're calling it this week. So before we get into the show, I want to make sure if you're going to Underdog Fantasy, use that promo code Familia you get matched up to the first $250 on your first deposit. Get in those best ball drafts. You might be drafting against me. You never know. And also make sure you're following Familia FFB on YouTube. Like we mentioned, people like John help this channel grow. So, so mi amigo, a couple changes going on, and some, some same thing. The big change, new offensive coordinator, and kind of, with Clint Kubiak. How is that going to impact Derek Carr and the offensive scheme overall?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it simplifies things a little bit more, and so I think you look at the offense last year. It was kind of a wake-up call, right? They were not doing really well on third downs or in the red zone early on. You had miscommunication, pretty much everything. All right. I mean, the first game against the Titans, the first couple of games was kind of a sense of false security, right? And this team just kind of hit a wall offensively. They didn't know how to use Taysom Hill properly. They couldn't get him involved properly at the right times. Alvin Kamara's usage was kind of off. They didn't really know how to use Jamal Williams. I mean, it was just a hard thing, right? But then they finally decided, hey, let's add a second practice into the week and let's work on our red zone issues. And lo and behold, they get better in the red zone and they start moving towards a play action type of offense that caters better to Derek Carr. And that was kind of what you saw down the stretch for the Saints. And so they obviously made a big decision in the offseason by moving on from Pete Carmichael and pretty much every offensive staff member that was there. And the only holdover is their tight ends coach, Clancy Barone. But that was obviously by design because enter Clint Kubiak, who is known for this, I don't want to say Kyle Shanahan style offense because it obviously goes back to his dad, Gary Kubiak, who was with the Texans. It's more of a style of that. And so it's a wide zone concept. It's a lot of outside runs. It's a lot of play action. It's a lot of motion. And so I say all that to say that's what you should expect out of the Saints offense. And in turn, that should make Derek Carr a little bit better. He shouldn't take as many more hits. It should open things up in the passing game. They're going to be very run heavy. But of course, a lot of this doesn't hinge. It hinges on the offensive line, which is somewhere they're kind of a lot uncertainty yet, if you will. But they made the necessary moves, at least on paper, and got the coaching staff, with Andrew Janoko. He served with Clint Kubiak over in Minnesota. Clancy Barone was with them in Minnesota. You got Rick Dennison, who is part of that tree, and then John Benton is also part of that tree. And then you add Keith Williams, their wide receivers coach, who is phenomenal, a guy they picked up from Baltimore. And so they've got the pieces there from a coaching standpoint. But the biggest thing for the Saints fans and for the Saints, it has to work because this is a team that's 3 years removed from the playoffs.
Yeah, and you mentioned the play action. I know in the fantasy community, people talked about that Derek Carr didn't run a lot of play action before. How important is that going to be to kind of unlocking guys like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed this year?
I mean, I think it's huge. I mean, the thing is about play action is if you can get the defense off their game for just a half second, that means
Right.
a lot in the NFL, right? In a half second, you just see the difference, the breakdowns in communication and all this stuff. And I get it. It's like, well, why wouldn't the teams do this all the time? And some teams do it better than other teams. But I think when you look at the offenses and how they've evolved over the years, the Saints were running the same type of offense that they've kind of been running since 2006. And so, again, I think teams have caught up to it. They've smartened up a little bit more to it. And so for the Saints, guys like Chris Olave, now he's the number one wide receiver. There is no Michael Thomas in the picture. And so he's going to be their number one guy. He bulked up this offseason. He's obviously worked a lot more on the contested catches, possession style. And he wants to go from good to being elite. And so I think he has the right mindset. I think he has the right coach. I think this offense is going to play well for him and Rashid Shaheed, because I think he's the other constant, that you can put on when you're looking, especially in fantasy drafts or anything like that, that Olave and Shaheed are going to be both of your guys that you target. And Shaheed's not only going to eat in the receiving department, I think he's obviously going to get a lot more looks in terms of the return game now that they've changed the new kickoff rule.
You know what? There's been a lot of talk about Shaheed being kind of like a cheat code in fantasy this year because of that kickoff. I tell you, if that happens, our amiga of the show, Cooter Doodle, who's one of the biggest Saints fans out there and the biggest Rashid Shaheed fan, she'll go off the reservation. It's gonna be over. One last question on Olave. He's kind of like on that cusp. He was up around high 130s as far as targets are concerned. Is he going to be a kind of similar number, or could he become even more of a target magnet in this new offense?
I think he's certainly going to see similar production. I think, I actually wrote a piece on this in Saints News Network looking at Chris Olave compared to, guys like Marcus Colston and Michael Thomas and what they did in their first couple of years with the Saints and in their third year trajectory. I mean, Olave's numbers have been solid. And if you look at some of the fantasy projections, he's kind of a top 20, top 25 player in that mix. And so, again, I think he's going to be the beneficiary of a lot of this offense, but teams are going to be smarter on how they defend against the Saints. I think Alvin Kamara is a guy that's probably under the radar right now. And of course, there's a lot going on right now in that situation, but I don't think that's something that's going to linger in the training camp. But, Chris Olave is probably, I'm writing on it. It's kind of just talking about fantasy football, but I'm writing on, the guys that you should target. And Olave is one of those guys. I think he's somewhere in that vicinity where he can get 120 targets, 150 targets this season. And I think the chemistry is better with Derek Carr. And I say that because one of the little things, the nuances when we're watching minicamp and stuff and OTAs is, Derek Carr was off target with Olave, like whether it was miscommunication, whether his fault, Olave's fault, it didn't matter. He went up to Chris after and said, "Hey man, that's a bad ball on my part." And they're building that bridge, that chemistry. And so I think they're in for a lot better, looks. And I'm not going to say it's like Carr and Devontae Adams type stuff, but I think he's going to do just fine in this offense. And I think he's going to be one of the better receivers when it's all said and done this league season.
We would love close to Carr and Devontae, so that would be a little bit fun. So fingers crossed. You touched on Alvin Kamara. Let's jump into him right now. One of the underrated. He was one of the top 10 players on fantasy championships last year. Kind of came on. I mean, there was a suspension early on in the season, but became a receiving as usual. He was one of the best receiving backs out there. People are kind of underrating him this year, and how much of a payoff could people who take a chance on Alvin Kamara, how much of a payoff could they have? Because I think he's very underpriced this year.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a PPR league, I mean, he was a receiving magnet for a lot of times. I mean, there was that one game he had, 13 catches for 35 yards. So that didn't really do you much, right? But he's going to be a huge focal point in this offense. And he knows that. Clint Kubiak knows that. The Saints know that. And that's why, right now, what he's looking at in the contract, because there's been a lot of things that have been thrown out, misconceptions. If so, he just wants guarantees from the Saints that he's their guy, right? And he's only has the $1 million in the salary right now. This next year's cap of almost $30 million, he's never going to see that. But if you can get him some guaranteed money, I think that's really what would help him out the best. And look, they've done it with guys like Tyron, DeMario, Cam, kind of put him into this 2-year window that this team has. And so Kamara's going to be a huge focal point. Now, it's going to be Christian McCaffrey-esque, but I also think when you look at this approach, I think they're going to better use Jamal Williams. And I'm going to tell you, look, if you're in a dynasty league, if you're looking at, guys that are sleepers, I think when it's all said and done, Kendre Miller could be a guy that you really want to look at, single in, hone in, probably more so than Jamal Williams, in my opinion, is a slight handcuff to Alvin Kamara, just because I think at the end of the day, he could be somebody that sees increased targets, but Kamara is the most consistent back that you could take when it comes to New Orleans.
I was going to ask you about Miller. How's his health? How's his knee after having the knee surgery last year that felt like it really impacted him much of the season?
Yeah, I mean, it was unfortunate, because he started hurt and didn't get into camp until later, and then obviously had some preseason moments, and then was doing his thing throughout the season and got hurt against the Bears, and then we really never saw him again. And then you see him in the season finale, and that's what we believe that Kendre Miller had the potential to do, because Kamara got hurt in that Bucs game, and then he didn't play in the finale, but Kendre Miller obviously stepped up in a big way, and he showed off his versatility in the running department and the receiving department. And so I think for Kendre Miller, those injury concerns, all that other stuff, that's kind of behind him. And I think some of the people that you look at, especially for rookies, one of the biggest things I hear about is in the second year, things slow down for you. And then when you go into your second year, you actually have an off season. So like a lot of these college players will go from into college season, train for the NFL, draft. I mean, you got the combines, you got senior bowls, hula bowls, East-West Shrine Bowls, you got pro days, you got all these things in the combine that leads up to the draft, and then go from the draft to the rookie mini camp, and then rookie mini camp into OTAs, and then you're looking at mandatory mini camp, and then training camp. So it's like a nonstop cycle for some of these players, and I think Kendre Miller is one of those that has benefited from. Okay, he has a real off season now. He's coming in here. He has a clear defined role, and I think no matter what running back, a lot of them are going to probably do pretty well in this Kubiak offense.
Oh man. Well, I can't let you off the hook without some Taysom Hill talk. You mentioned, I mean, last year you recommended him, and that helped me help other people to do that. Is he kind of lined up for another kind of like Joker kind of role on the season?
Yeah, I mean, this is an ultimate risk reward type of player, right? And I'm writing something up on him. I'm looking into his numbers and stuff in his target share, and I think when I looked at it, it was like 8 games where he has at least 40% of the snaps, offensive snaps or more, and just the impact that comes off of that. And it's I don't remember the actual numbers that I put in, but I did the percentages of his totals. So basically, like his percentage of his reception yards, his receiving targets, his yards and running yards. So I'd say stay tuned, because that's coming. But I say that just what we've seen, what we know is Taysom Hill's doing still everything, right? I think everything except for really doing much at quarterback, right? I think that's the only thing I really haven't seen a ton of, but he's lining up at tailback right now. He's being the lead blocker and fullback. I mean, they could put him in a Kyle Juszczyk type role if they wanted to, but he's a fun weapon, and Clint Kubiak's going to use him. And so they can use him at tight end. They could use him at fullback. They could use him at halfback, tailback. He can still do QB powers. He can still throw the football. I don't know that we're going to see him throw it as much, but he's got that element of surprise and gadget players. And look, if you're in a league that tracks tackles, especially for IDPs, he plays special teams. He might get you a couple here and there, at the same time, but he's a fascinating player. And again, I know some people feel certain ways because of the contract, that he's a gimmick player, all this other stuff. He's one of one, man. There's nobody around the league that does what he does, and nobody that's done it for a long time. And so I think some people are just mad because the Saints have found a way to make it work. And I think Hill's in for a pretty good season. But again, you're going to take him, be cautious, because he's got that boom bust reward type of performance, and it depends on where he's put as a positional player, right? Like if he's a quarterback, if he's a tight end, or if he's a flex, that's going to matter in your drafts for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely keep an eye on that, because if you can't put him in, I recommend only being able to put him in tight end, because he's such a cheat code, especially with the fact that, I mean, he could see more usage with Juwan Johnson dealing with foot injury, correct?
Yeah, he's dealing with one. It could linger a little bit more into camp. I was told originally it was about 6 to 8 weeks on him
Mm.
from everything, but he had surgery and stuff, and this is a guy that unfortunately just couldn't stay healthy, and he had a really good back half of the year. The tight end group is really uncertain. I think you should proceed with caution there. I would tell you a guy you got to keep an eye on is Dallin Holker. He's an undrafted rookie out of Colorado State.
Oh,
This guy is making a lot of waves, a lot of things and stuff that he's doing. I as of right now, I think he's going to make the final roster. I think he's going to have a role with this team at this moment. Now, a lot's going to happen within the next couple of months, so I could be obviously off base, but I think based off of what we've seen, with Juwan Johnson nursing some things, they don't have Jimmy Graham back yet. I don't know if that's going to actually happen. Foster Moreau could be somebody that's in line for more targets, but Juwan is probably your safest tight end bet. But again, if you're in a dynasty league, look at somebody, it's a sleeper, at least put him on your watch list would be Dallin Holker. Keep an eye on him because I think he's somebody that could end up being a big role or playing a big role for this team down the stretch. Maybe
let's
think
go.
like an Isaiah Likely from the Ravens, maybe down the stretch like that. That's kind of where I would put him.
Oh, that's I mean he's become a sneaky weapon over the last couple his first couple seasons in the NFL. You mentioned the offensive line and there's been investment there. We looking at we looking at an upgrade this year?
I hope so. I think the only constants that you see right now is Eric McCoy at center and Cesar Ruiz at right guard. Now they used their first round pick on Taliesin Fuanga, the best pick they could. That's the guy I mocked. That's the guy that made the most sense to me. They needed a solution at right tackle because of Ryan Ramczyk. His future is very much in doubt. I'd be absolutely surprised if he plays football again. That's just kind of where we're at. And so it's unfortunate, but they took Fuanga. They've put him on the left side because they know he can play right tackle. So he's learning the left tackle position right now. That's a little bit interesting that's been the case. I'm interested to see if that continues into camp, if that's the long-term solution or if they're still trying this out. But Trevor Penning, he's going to his third year.
Yeah.
He's playing right tackle at the moment. They're really expecting a lot out of him. They've given him a clean slate. He has to produce. The pressure's on. And the left guard spot's very open. They had James Hurst that retired this offseason, something that was coming. And, now they're looking at a second-year player potentially in Nick Saldiveri that could go there. But they have some veterans that have been in this Kubiak style of offense, some type of semblance, like a guy like a Lucas Patrick, Oli Udo, or a Shane Lemieux. Those are guys that could fit in, veterans that you might keep a watch on. And look, this offensive line has to work, right? In order for this Kubiak offense to work, they got to have the offensive line. And so the good news is if they can get those three younger pieces on the offensive line to hit and be consistent, then they've got a solution to last for a few years, right? And I think that's the silver lining. But you look at a team like the Lions who have invested in their offensive line. I mean, I think that's the gold standard is you get all the young players in there that perform, can do the things that you need them to, and then it's something you just don't have to worry about it until it's time for a contract extension. But it's one of the biggest position groups that I think when you look at battles in terms of just what needs to happen and what we need to see, the offensive line it's got to be top 1 or 2. If anybody covers this team tells you it can't be anything else.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's got to be 1 or 2 on every team. So yeah, but yeah, especially when there's some sort of upheaval, something I'm sure you're going to be keeping an eye on. Last thing on defense, this was a very good secondary last year. How are they shaping up against the run and the pass?
Yeah, I think against the run remains to be seen. I was looking at defensive stats or fantasy, and I think they were 8th ranked last year as DST. Now it depends if you're DST formats or IDP if we're talking fantasy, but because they got some tackle machines like a Demario Davis. But look, I think the pieces are there for them to still be successful. Obviously, they added Chase Young off the edge. Their interior, I mean, it has to be better. Like their run defense was a little bit better, but that's kind of like saying, well, I had a peanut butter jelly sandwich with, maybe a step up of a bread, like instead of wheat, I got like a white bread. You know what I'm saying? I'm a honey wheat guy or something like that. But just it's a step up. It was in the right direction, but it's still a lot to to digest for them is they got to be better against the run. The question mark is their front line, their front in the trenches. What do you get out of Cam Jordan this year? He's up there, right? And he knows it, and he's coming off of a foot surgery and such. And so, or ankle surgery. And I say that prematurely, but just a problem with his lower extremities that he's got corrected. He should be good to go. Chase Young had the neck surgery. They expect a lot of big things out of him. He's excited to be here. He looks very determined. Carl Granderson is a guy that obviously led them in sacks. I think he's primed for a double-digit sack season for him. It's the interior for me. I think Brian Brzee is going to take a major leap, but outside of that, Colin Saunders, veteran, Nathan Shepard, a veteran, and potentially a rookie and Christian Boyd. But I think linebacker-wise, they're set. Demario Davis is defying father time, right? And Pete Warner, a little bit opportunity against the coverage, but they brought in Willie Gay Jr., who's excellent against mobile quarterbacks, and that's why I think the run game will be a little bit better for sure this year. And look, he's got a ball of energy. He's fresh off of a Super Bowl win with the Chiefs. The Saints kind of like the former Chiefs, if you will. Like they've done this with Colin Saunders, Tano Passignon, Tyron, now obviously Willie Gay Jr., so it's kind of a running joke. And so I think their linebacker unit can be formidable, right? And I don't want to discount guys like Khalid Hudson, who they picked up from Washington. He's a guy that can play a role in this team as well. I think the secondary is their strength. When they decided to fix everything with Marshawn Lattimore, which again, everything that I was told back in January, February, they didn't want to move on from Marshawn. Everybody in under sun, and it's still happening where they're trying to trade Marshawn Lattimore. Like he's here, he's invested, he's bought in, he wants to prove that he's an elite corner. Paulson Adebo goes into a contract year. Alante Taylor's got a second year now in the slot. I think their secondary is absolutely outstanding, especially at corner. And then it's safety group. It's Tyrann Mathieu. He's a guy that can get a nose for turnovers. And then, now they got to figure out, is it Jonathan Abram, the veteran who's, great story, former first round pick, obviously didn't work out with the Raiders. He's somebody that, man, if you just follow his trajectory last year with the Saints, it's a great story, awesome player, great guy, rooting for him for sure. And Jordan Howden, their second-year player. And they could still add in free agency. I think Justin Simmons is a guy that they've thrown out too. And so they could be still in the market to add good players. And I think the defense still is going to be one of their formidable things. They just need the offense to complement them now.
Oh man, well, hopefully they do. Hopefully, I mean, more fantasy points on that one. Maybe want to close it up. Your pinned tweet showed, kind of like a new you, and I love it. Newer, healthier. Instead of the usual Mexican food talk. By the way, if you look at past episodes, because he has great recommendations on there. But I'd love to hear about the kind of like your new health journey.
Yeah, man. So, I think I got serious probably a little bit ago, maybe about a year ago. It was like last December. And so I was at my heaviest, I was pushing about 287. And I'm 5'9", 5'10". So I'm not a big guy. I'm a tall guy, but I mean, obviously it goes into I go this way when it comes to putting on weight. It's in the tummy and it's in the backside. And so I just, I started changing up a little bit, and then I could get down to about the 260s, right? And then I just started working on my Peloton in the summertime because, there's not much else to do. We had one donated to us like last year by a family, and it was free. So I found some instructor I liked on YouTube, and I just kept doing her classes, and I did it for a 30-day challenge. And then I said, okay, I did the Forrest Gump. I'm like, well, since I've gone this far, let me go up to 45. And I'm like, well, since I've gone this far, let me go up to 60. And in 60 days, I only missed one day of doing an exercise because I was coming back from camping. And, I'm hovering at 231. So I've lost about 56 pounds in about a year and a half, maybe year and a half. And so, part of that is changing the food. I've added a lot of protein. I've added a lot of different things. There's a lot of things. I'm just not snacking as much, right? I think that's the biggest thing is my guilty pleasure. There's chips and salty foods. Like I will eat a bag of chips till it's under the sun. Like it just is. And so, but changed up some things, and I feel fantastic. I'm not done, but now it's just good because I have two kids. My boys are 10 and 6, and, I can keep up with them a lot better now. My wife's obviously happy about it too. She's I wouldn't say a health nut, but she definitely takes care of her body better. And I'm usually the cook in our family. And so, it's been rewarding to do it. And man, anybody that ever has questions, or encouragement, I'm happy to help. in any way I can, because I know it's hard. I know it's a struggle. I know just all the things mentally of what it does to you and how hopeless it feels. And so if anybody can be inspired, then I'm grateful, and I'm grateful that I was able to do this and turn this thing around, because you know, it's going to mean a lot for my long-term health.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and you did it the right way. And you talked about consistency, and that's the big thing. That's the big thing,
Yep.
doing it every day. So, oh, mi amigo, thank you. Thank you for, finishing off on an uplifting one, uplifting, please feel free to pump what you got coming up on your Saints coverage.
Yeah, the biggest thing is we do a podcast now with Ross Jackson, who's Locked On Saints. Everybody should know Ross Jackson. He's one of the hardest working people when it comes to cover the Saints. So we teamed up to do a show called Second and Saints. It's on YouTube. We're going live on Tuesday evening, and we're going to be in California for training camp. So we're going to be busy, very, very busy. But that's kind of the big thing right now, is Ross and I kind of started about February or in March, and the channel's been well received, growing mode and all that good stuff. And so Saints fans, man, it's great. It's a heck of a thing. You know, we always talk about when you love New Orleans, they'll love you back. And it's just the creed we live by, is New Orleans is such a fantastic place. And I've been in South Louisiana since 1992, and I'm a lot older than I look and stuff. It's those Hispanic genes, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
But you know, it's been very nice. And so I would encourage people to check that out. And then, of course, I'm on Twitter, X. I don't want to call it X. I hate calling it X. It's so stupid. And at John J. Hendrix, just like Jimmy, not like the gin. And then all the written works on Sports Illustrated's platform, Saints News Network. Just go to si.com/NFL/Saints, and you'll find us, and you'll see me quite often there.
Oh, mi amigo, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, just do great work. Muchas gracias for joining us. And
Yes.
amigos, amigas, thank you. Thank you. Gracias. Gracias. This has been
Nada.
awesome. Another great episode. One last plug real quick. Make sure you're going to Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code Familia, and you'll get matched up to $250. And don't forget, you get great content like this, Familia FFB on YouTube. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. After you subscribe to their channel, okay? Let's get over there. Hey, that's it right now. Remember, todos somos familia. Salud.